Evelyn's lungs burned, each breath a jagged blade of ice. Behind her, the snapping of bone and the rhythmic thud of heavy paws echoed through the midnight mist. These weren't dogs. They were monsters, 7 feet of fur and hunger, their howls vibrating in her very marrow. She tripped over a gnarled root, crashing against a monolith of stone. Cornered, 6 pairs of glowing, violet eyes emerged from the dark. The largest wolf stepped forward, its muzzle stained with fresh crimson. Human meat, it grated, the voice sounding like grinding stones. Lost and tender. Desperation is a wicked teacher. Evelyn remembered the whispers from the village taverns, the one name that made even the bravest hunters cross themselves. The Alpha of Alphas. The Butcher of the Black Peaks. "Touch me," Evelyn gasped, her voice trembling but loud, "and Silas Valerie's will tear your hearts from your chests before you can blink." The forest went deathly silent. The wolves froze, their predatory sneers replaced by a flicker of genuine terror. "I am his mate," the light or from her lips, tasting like copper and sin. The shadows behind the wolves began to bleed together, thickening until they formed the silhouette of a man. He moved with a lethal, feline grace, stepping into the moonlight. Silas. He was a titan of muscle and scars, his eyes a haunting, molten amber that seemed to peel back the layers of her soul. He leaned down, his breath hot against the shell of her ear. "Is that so, little bird?" His voice was a low, velvet growl that vibrated through her spine. "Then let's take you home, mate." His hand claimed her waist with a possessive strength that felt like a brand. Evelyn realized with a jolt of bone-deep terror her lie hadn't saved her life. It had simply signed it over to the devil himself. The gates of the Valerie stronghold groaned open like the jaws of a titan. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress of obsidian and secrets. Silas didn't speak as he hauled her through the corridors. Every wolf they passed dropped their head in submission, their eyes darting to Evelyn with a mixture of awe and predatory hunger. "My chambers," Silas commanded, kicking open to massive oak doors. The room was vast, draped in furs and smelling of cedar and dark, masculine power. He released her, and Evelyn stumbled toward the hearth, the firelight dancing in her wide eyes. "You can stop the trembling," Silas said, stripping off his leather coat to reveal it etched with the history of 1,000 battles. He didn't look like a king, he looked like a weapon. "I know who you are, Evelyn Thorne." Her heart skipped a beat. You know my name? I know you're a fugitive. I know you're a liar." He stepped into her personal space, the sheer heat of his body driving back the chill. "And I know you aren't my mate. A wolf knows his soul chath by scent alone, and you smell like nothing but fear and cheap lavender." Evelyn's legs turned to water. "Then why? Why save me?" Silas gripped her chin, forcing her to look into his burning amber eyes. "Because my enemies believe I have no weakness. If they think I've finally found a mate, they will crawl out of their holes to strike. And when they do, I will crush them." He leaned closer, his lips inches from hers. "You will play the part. You will sleep in my bed. You will wear my mark. And in exchange, I won't let my pack eat you alive. Do we have a deal, little liar?" The great hall was a pit of vipers. Evelyn sat at the high table, the heavy silver crown of the Luna feeling like a lead weight on her brow. Beside her, Silas sat like a god of war, his presence suffocating lie dominant. Chess human Silas Cassius, the beta, spat, slamming his flagon onto the wood. "The pack is restless. They scent the lie. They want a real Luna, not a stray you picked up in the woods." The air in the room curdled. Evelyn felt the eyes of 100 wolves on her, waiting for her to break. "Is that so?" Silas's voice was a soft, dangerous purr. Before Evelyn could react, he surged toward her. He didn't kiss her, he claimed her. His muzzle pressed into the sensitive pulse point of her neck, his teeth grazing her skin in a silent threat. He breathed her in, his scent an intoxicating mix of rain and wood smoke clinging to her skin like a second soul. It was an ancient, primal gesture. He was marking her, drowning her scent in his own so the world knew who she belonged to. Evelyn's breath hitched. A traitorous heat bloomed in her chest, a physical reaction to his proximity that she couldn't suppress. Her body was responding to him, even if her mind screamed in protest. "Any other questions about who she belongs to?" Silas asked the room, his eyes glowing a lethal violet. No one dared to breathe. But as Evelyn looked into the crowd, she saw one pair of eyes, the former mistress, Elena, glinting with a hatred that promised a slow, agonizing death. The walk to the tactical loft was a gauntlet of silence. Evelyn kept her head high, but every time her boot clicked against the cold stone, the sound felt like a countdown. Stay sharp, Evelyn, she told herself. In this house, silence isn't peace, it's a coiled viper. Inside the loft, the air was thick with the smell of old parchment and the metallic tang of unsheeted steel. Silas stood by a massive iron map, his fingers tracing the borders of the black peaks. He didn't turn around, but he knew she was there. You have a habit of looking at me as if I'm about to snap your neck, Silas remarked, his voice a low vibration that seemed to travel through the floorboards. Aren't you? Evelyn retorted, her voice steadier than she felt. Silas turned, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, a predator's smile. If I wanted you dead, little liar, you wouldn't have felt the pain. You're a more useful alive. For now. Suddenly the heavy oak door creaked open. Cassius entered, his face a mask of calculated coldness. The scouts report movement on the southern ridge, Alpha. The Iron Claw pack is sniffing at our borders. They've heard the rumors of your new bride. Silas's eyes flickered to Evelyn, a sharp, assessing look. Then we give them a show at the moon-gazing hunt tonight. Human at the hunt. Cassius scoffed, leaning against the wall, his eyes narrowing at Evelyn. She'll be dead before the first moonrise. Unless, of course, she has hidden talents we haven't seen. Evelyn felt the trap closing. This wasn't just a hunt, it was an interrogation. Meanwhile, in the dim light of the lower armory, Elena watched from the shadows. Her fingers traced the edge of a silver-tipped arrow. She won't survive the ridge, Elena whispered to the shadows. She won't have to, a voice replied. It was Cassius, stepping out of the dark. If Silas won't kill the lie, we'll make the forest do it for him. One accidental nudge near the ravine of sighs. Let's see if her Alpha can catch a falling star. The forest at night was a chaotic symphony of snapping twigs and heavy breathing. Evelyn clung to the reins of a massive gray stallion that seemed to hate her as much as the wolves did. Narrator's note: listen to the heavy rhythmic thumping of the horse's hooves against the damp earth. The tension is a physical weight, a tightening in the listener's chest. Silas was a shadow at the front of the pack, his golden eyes occasionally cutting through the darkness to find her. He was silent, a phantom general leading a ghostly army. Keep up, Luna, Elena hissed, pulling her horse alongside Evelyn's. Or is the pace too much for your fragile heart? Before Evelyn could answer, Elena's hand moved in a blur. A small, sharp stone imbued with a pungent wolf nip oil struck Evelyn's stallion. The beast let out a shrill, panic scream, rearing back. Whoa, easy, Evelyn cried, but the horse was gone, bolted into the thickest part of the woods. Branches tore at her face. The world was a blur of black and gray. Behind her, the laughter of the pack faded, replaced by a much more terrifying sound, the rhythmic, heavy breathing of something following her. Not Silas. Something larger. The horse skidded at the edge of the ravine of sighs, its hooves sending stones cascading into the bottomless dark. Evelyn slipped, her fingers clutching at the wet grass, the horse galloping away into the void. Narrator's note: silence. Only the sound of wind whistling through the ravine. Then a slow, heavy footstep. A hand, large and calloused, shot of the dark, grabbing her wrist just as the earth gave way. Silas. He hauled her up with a single, brutal tug, pinning her against his chest. His heart was hammering not with fear, but with an icy, controlled rage. I told you to stay close, he growled. She tripped the horse, Evelyn gasped, clutching his tunic. I know, Silas said, his eyes scanning the trees. I was waiting for her to move. But we have a bigger problem. From the canopy above, 3 shadows dropped. Assassins. Their blades gleamed with a dull, sickening moonlight silver. The Wolf King and his human toy, one hissed, shifting into a monstrous half-wolf form. Silas pushed Evelyn behind him, his claws extending with a sickening schlick sound. Run to the ancient oak, Evelyn. Don't look back. If I don't follow in 10 minutes. Keep running until you hit the sea. The first assassin lunged. Silas intercepted him Mydra, but a second blade, coated in silver dust, sliced across Silas's shoulder. He let out a roar of agony, the first time Evelyn had ever heard him sound. Mortal. The smell of ozone and blood filled the air. Silas was fighting like a cornered god, his movements hindered by the silver poison burning through his veins. Evelyn stood by the ancient oak, her breath hitching in her throat. Run, her mind screamed. Run and never look back. But then she saw it. The third assassin was circling behind Silas, a jagged silvered dagger aimed at the base of his skull. Silas was occupied with two others, his snarls becoming more strained. Evelyn didn't think. She grabbed a heavy, iron-bound flask from her satchel, a gift from a sympathetic servant, and scrambled up the low-hanging branches of the oak. Narrators note the sound of scraping bark, the frantic gasp of a woman realizing she's about to engage a monster. As the assassin lunged, Evelyn rocked from the branch, her full weight in the iron flask slamming into the back of the creature's head. The assassin crumpled. Silas spun, his eyes wild and violet, his claws buried in the chest of the second enemy. He looked at Evelyn, blood dripping from his chin, shock momentarily overriding his predatory instincts. "You stayed," he wheezed, falling to one knee as the fight ended. The silver was working fast, black veins were spreading from the wound on his shoulder. Evelyn knelt beside him, ignoring the gore. "I'm a liar, Silas, not a coward. And if you die, I'm just an appetizer for the next thing that comes along." She tore a strip from her dress, soaking it in the cool water of her flask to wipe the silver dust from his wound. Silas let out a low, guttural moan, his head falling onto her shoulder. A small movement in the bushes caught her eye. A pup, barely a year old, stepped out. It had watched the whole thing. It didn't growl. Instead, it let out a soft whine and nudged Evelyn's hand with its wet nose. The first crack in the pack's wall of hatred had appeared, but as Evelyn looked up, she saw the torches of the search party approaching. Cassius and Delano were at the front. Silas grabbed Evelyn's hand, his grip weak but his eyes burning. "Hide the knife, Evelyn. When they arrive, tell them I saved you. Tell them I am invincible. If they know I'm hurt. The coup begins tonight." The stone walls of the fortress felt like they were closing in, sweating cold moisture that smelled of damp moss and impending doom. Silas was a dead weight in her arms, his skin radiating a feverish, unnatural heat. Narrators note: lower your voice here. Make the listener feel the claustrophobia of the dimly lit corridor. The only sound is the heavy dragging of boots and Evelyn's jagged breath. "Hold it together, Evelyn," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. "One slip, one tremble, and you're the first one they tear apart." She managed to haul him into the master chambers just as the heavy thud of footsteps echoed from the spiral staircase. It was Cassius. He didn't knock, he signaled his arrival with the raw scent of ambition and aggressive musk. "Move aside, human," Cassius growled, his hand already on the iron door handle. "The pack demands to see the alpha. There are rumors of silver. Rumors that he fell." Evelyn blocked the door, her back pressed against the cold oak. She didn't have a claw or fang, but she had the one thing these wolves lacked: the ability to play a long, calculated game of bluff. "The alpha is occupied," she said, injecting a cold, haughty boredom into her tone. He was displeased by the security breach at the Ridge. "HES currently meditating on who to execute first for allowing assassins into our woods. Unless you'd like to be the first volunteer." Cassius paused, his eyes narrowing. He could smell the blood on her dress, but he couldn't see past the door. The uncertainty was a flickering flame. "He hasn't spoken since you returned. Why? Would you speak to your inferiors after such an embarrassment?" Evelyn stepped forward, encroaching on his personal space, a move of pure suicide that confused the wolf's instincts. "He told me to tell you if anyone interrupts us before the moon reaches its zenith, they won't just lose their rank. They'll lose their skin. Do you wish to test his patience, Cassius?" For 3 agonizing seconds, the beta wolf loomed over her. Evelyn didn't blink. She channeled every ounce of Silas's terrifying presence she had witnessed. Finally, Cassius stepped back, a low, frustrated rumble in his chest. "Tonight, girl. But at dawn the council sits. If he isn't there, no amount of human lies will save you." He turned and vanished into the shadows. Evelyn collapsed against the door, her knees hitting the floor. Inside, Silas let out a ragged, tortured moan. The real battle was just beginning. The bedroom was a sanctuary of shadows, lit only by the dying embers in the hearth. Silas lay on the furs, his muscles twitching in a rhythmic, agonizing spasm. The black veins of the silver poison had reached his throat. Narrators note the sound of a knife being sharpened against a stone. Slow, methodical. The listener should feel the weight of the task ahead. "I'm sorry about this, Silas," Evelyn whispered, picking up the small, sterilized silver-bladed knife, irony at its finest. To save a wolf, she had to use the very thing that was killing him. She began to cut away the blackened flesh near his shoulder. Silas's eyes snapped open, glowing a violent, blinding violet. He let out a sound that wasn't a growl or a scream, but a primal roar of pure agony. His hand shot out, catching her throat, his claws grazing her skin. "Silas, it's me, Evelyn." His grip tightened for a heartbeat, his predatory instinct fighting his consciousness. Then his eyes cleared. He saw her sweat-soaked, bloody, and determined. He let go, his hand falling limply back to the bed. "Why haven't you?" "Run?" he wheezed, his voice sounding like broken glass. "And go where?" "To the magistrate." "To the Iron Claws?" She didn't stop working, her hands steady despite the gore. "I told you, I'm in this. We're the only two people in this castle who aren't trying to kill each other right now." Silas let out a dark, hollow laugh that turned into a cough. "You think there was an accident finding you?" Evelyn paused, the knife hovering over his skin. "What do you mean?" "The bond." "It doesn't wait for words," he murmured, his fevered eyes searching hers. "I smelled you. 2 miles before I saw you. Before you said my name. Before you lied. My wolf had already stopped hunting deer. He was hunting you." The revelation hit her harder than any physical blow. "You knew? You knew I was coming?" "I knew you were my end," Silas whispered, his hand finding hers, his grip surprisingly strong. "A human mate. The ultimate death sentence for an alpha. But the lie gave me an excuse to keep you. To see if you were worth the war." Evelyn felt a tear slip down her cheek. "Am I?" Silas pulled her down, his lips brushing hers, tasting of copper and fever. "Ask me when the sun rises. If we're both still breathing." The great hall was a sea of bared teeth and low, rumbling growls. The council of elders sat in high stone chairs, their eyes like cold flint. In the center, Cassius stood with Elena, both of them radiating a smug, lethal confidence. "Where is the alpha?" Elder Thorne demanded, his voice like the cracking of a whip. "The sun is up, and his throne is empty." The heavy double doors swung open, but it wasn't the towering silhouette of Silas that emerged. It was Evelyn. She wore a gown of deep crimson, covered by a breastplate of etched steel. In her hand, she held the Valerie's Signete, heavy gold ring that symbolized the Alpha's absolute power. Narrators note the sound of the ring clinking against the stone table. A sharp, definitive sound that cuts through the murmurs of the pack. "The Alpha is in the final stage of the Bloodmount Transcendence," Evelyn said, her voice projecting to the back of the hall. "The silver attack at the ridge triggered an early evolution. To disturb him now is to invite a madness that will burn this fortress to the ground." "Lies," Elena screamed, stepping forward, her face twisted in rage. "He is dying. I saw the silver strike him. Yuri standing there in his armor, pretending to be a queen when you're nothing but a thief." "Am I?" Evelyn walked straight up to Elena, stopping only inches from her face. She didn't have the scent of a wolf, but she carried Silas's scent so heavily it was almost a physical cloak. "I carry his mark on my neck and his ring in my hand. If you doubt his power, go to his door. Open it. See if you survive his first breath of fury." Cassius moved toward her, his claws sliding out. "I don't need to go to his door. I can smell the human fear on you right now." "Then let's settle it," Evelyn said, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "The trial of blood. If I am the true mate of the Alpha, the ancient stones will accept my offering. If I am a liar, kill me now and be done with it." The hall went deathly silent. The trial of blood was a myth, a ritual that hadn't been performed in 300 years. It required a human to spill their blood on the altar of the first wolf. If the pack's magic accepted the sacrifice, the human was granted the protection of the pack. If not, the blood ignited, consuming the liar. Cassius looked at the elders. They nodded slowly. "The human has invoked the old ways," Elder Thorne said. "Prepare the altar." The air in the subterranean cavern was ancient, tasting of dust and the metallic tang of thousands of years of spilled blood. The altar of the first wolf was not a smooth table, it was a jagged outcrop of obsidian, etched with runes that seemed to pulse with a faint, rhythmic heartbeat. Narrators now create a sense of heavy, echoing space. The sound of water dripping in the distance. The low, synchronized chanting of the pack elders. A slow, pounding drumbeat starts. Evelyn walked toward the stone, her crimson rest railing behind her like a river of blood. Every eye in the cavern, hundreds of glowing violet, amber, and blue orbs was fixed on her throat. "Step forward," Evelyn Thorne, Elder Thorne commanded, his voice echoing off the damp walls. "The stone does not recognize names. It recognizes essence. If you are the true Luna, the mountain will sing. If you are a pretender, the mountain will feast. Cassius stood at the edge of the circle, his arms crossed, a sneer of triumph etched into his rugged features. He knew the odds. A human surviving the altar was a statistical 0. Beside him, Elena leaned in, whispering loud enough for Evelyn to hear, "I hope the flames are quick. I hate the smell of burning hair." Evelyn reached the altar. She looked at the jagged obsidian edge. Her hand trembled, but she forced it still. Narrator's note, internal monologue, fast, frantic. "Silas, if you can hear me in that drug-induced fog, wake up. I can't bluff my way out of ancient magic. If our bond is real, give me a sign. Don't let me die for a lie we both started." She pressed her palm against the sharp stone. A thin, crimson line appeared across her skin. The blood began to pool, dripping slowly into the thirsty cracks of the obsidian. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The silence was so absolute that Evelyn could hear the frantic rhythm of her own heart. Then the ground groaned. A low-frequency vibration started in the soles of her feet and surged upward. The runes on the altar began to glow, not with the expected fire, but with a searing, violent violet light, the exact color of Silas's eyes. Narrator's note, the sound of a thunderous roar, muffled as if coming from deep underground. The violet glow intensifies until the screen or the mind's eye is filled with light. A psychic shockwave blasted outward, knocking the front row of wolves to their knees. Evelyn felt a searing heat in her chest, a phantom weight pressing against her soul. It was Silas. He wasn't there physically, but his roar echoed through the cavern as if he were standing right behind her. The Alpha's mark, an elder screamed, prostrating himself. "The stone accepts her. She is blood of his blood." Cassius's face went white. He scrambled backward, his eyes wide with a terror he couldn't hide. The violet light didn't just accept Evelyn, it seemed to shield her, the blood on the altar crystallizing into dark, gleaming gems. Evelyn pulled her hand back. The wound was already closing, stitched together by a surge of borrowed power. She turned to the crowd, her eyes reflecting the dying violet embers. "Any other doubts?" she asked, her voice ringing with an authority that wasn't entirely her own. "Or shall we discuss the punishment for those who doubted their Luna?" The heavy doors of the great hall didn't just open, they were blasted off their hinges. Silas Valeries walked into the hall like a storm given human form. He was still pale, and he leaned slightly to one side, but the raw, unchecked power radiating from him made the very air hum with electricity. He was shirtless, his bandages soaked in the black residue of the silver poison, looking like a god who had just crawled out of hell. Narrators note the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps. Each step is a beat in the listener's ear, the dragging of a heavy steel blade against the stone floor. He didn't look at the elders. He didn't look at the pack. His eyes were locked on Evelyn, who stood by the throne, clutching the signet ring. "Silas," she breathed, the word a mixture of relief and renewed fear. He reached her in 3 long strides, his hand snaking out to cup the back of her head. He pressed his forehead against hers, a silent, intimate communion that ignored the hundreds of witnesses. "You stayed," he growled, his voice a gravelly rasp. "You fought the stone." "I didn't have much choice," she whispered back. Silas turned to the hall, his gaze falling on Cassius, who was trembling in the shadows. "Cassius," Silas said, the name sounding like a death sentence. "Step forward." The beta wolf crawled toward the dais, his head bowed. "Alpha, the rumors. We thought you were compromised. I was only protecting the pack's interest." "Protecting?" Silas let out a short, bark-like laugh. "You stood by while my mate bled on the obsidian. You doubted the mark I placed on her. Silas didn't kill him. Death was too quick for treason. You are stripped of your rank. Your family's lands are forfeit. From this moment, you are the lowest tier of the pack's scavenger. You will eat only what the pups leave behind. If you ever speak to the Luna again, I will peel the skin from your bones while you're still shifted." As Cassius was dragged out, howling in shame, Silas turned to Evelyn. The hall was cleared, the doors barred. "The altar shouldn't have worked," Silas said, his eyes searching hers in the flickering torchlight. "A human bloodline cannot trigger the violet flame. Unless what?" Evelyn asked. "Unless the lie was never a lie," Silas murmured, his hand tracing the line of her jaw. "The mountain doesn't care about what we say. It cares about what the soul knows. Evelyn Thorne, I think the universe decided you were mine long before we met in those woods. I just wasn't wise enough to see it." The peace lasted less than a night. At midnight, a heavy object was hurled over the castle walls. It landed in the courtyard with a sickening wet thud. When the guards approached, they found the remains of Marcus, the Ridge Scout. He had been flayed, his skin pinned back with iron-clawed daggers. Narrator's note increased the tempo here. The sound of shouting guards, the clanging of the alarm bell. A sharp, discordant violin track in the background. Silas and Evelyn stood over the body. Silas's face was a mask of cold, focused fury. But it was the note pinned to Marcus's chest that stopped Evelyn's heart. It was written in a formal, human hand. To the Wolf King, you hold a thief in your bed. Evelyn Thorne didn't run from a magistrate's bed, she ran from the royal vault of the South. She carries the map of the Silver Vein, the location of the original mine that can wipe your kind from the earth. Hand over the girl in the map, or we will turn your peaks into a graveyard. Silas turned to Evelyn, his amber eyes glowing with a sudden, sharp suspicion. Is it true? Evelyn felt the world spinning. The secret she had buried under layers of lies was finally crawling out. I didn't steal it for them, Silas. I stole it so the humans couldn't use it. I was trying to save you, even before I knew you existed. The map, Evelyn, Silas growled, his hand gripping her shoulder with a strength that bordered on painful. Where is it? It's not a paper map. Silas, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. It's encoded in the blood. My blood. That's why the altar reacted. It wasn't just your bond. It was the ancient metal in my veins. Before Silas could respond, the horizon lit up. Not with the sun, but with fire. The Ironclaw pack wasn't waiting for an answer. The invasion had begun. The fortress of Black Peaks groaned under the assault of the Ironclaw war machines. The air was no longer filled with the scent of pine, it was choked with the sulphurous stench of fire pots and the metallic tang of fear. Narrators note the sound of a heavy whistling stone cutting through the air, followed by the bone-shaking crash of masonry. Screams of wounded wolves in the distance. The pace is frantic, heartbeat fast. Silas dragged Evelyn into the war room, his face a grim landscape of shadows. You carry the location of the Silver Vein in your blood, he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Every wolf in this realm is at risk because of what's inside you. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I was going to tell you. Evelyn cried, stumbling as another blast rocked the tower. But how do you tell a wolf that your very existence is a poison to his kind? I didn't steal it to destroy you, Silas. I stole it to hide it. And yet, Victor is here. He traced the scent of the metal, Silas growled, turning to the window as a volley of silver-tipped arrows hissed through the air, pinning a guard to the battlements. I can help, Evelyn said, her eyes flashing with a strange, metallic light. She grabbed a jagged piece of obsidian from the table and sliced her own forearm. What are you doing? Silas roared, reaching for her. Wait. As her blood spilled onto the stone floor, it didn't flow like normal liquid. It shimmered with a dull, mercurial sheen. Evelyn gasped, her pupils dilating. In her mind's eye, the battlefield transformed. She could see them bright, stinging points of light hidden in the tree line. The assassins. The silver bearers. Northwest Ridge, 300 yards, behind the weeping willow, she gasped, her body trembling from the sensory overload. They're aiming for the gate hinges with silver core bolts. Silas stared at her, then at the blood. He didn't hesitate. He let out a piercing howl that signaled his elite archers. Seconds later, a counter volley silenced the ridge. He looked at Evelyn, his expression softening into something terrified and awestruck. You're a compass for our death, he whispered. And you're bleeding yourself dry to save us. Victor of the Iron Claws was a nightmare carved from granite and spite. He stood 7.5 feet tall, his fur matted with silver dust that made him shimmer like a vengeful ghost under the blood moon. Narrators note the sound of heavy metal footsteps on the drawbridge. A low, distorted wolf growl that sounds more mechanical than biological. Valerie's Victor's voice boomed, vibrating the teeth in Evelyn's head. Hand over the girl in the map. Wide-eye for a human who is a walking cage for your extinction. Silas leapt from the battlements, shifting might ran to the towering, obsidian-furred beast that commanded the peaks. He collided with Victor in a spray of sparks. Evelyn watched from the wall, her nails digging into the stone. Every time Silas's claws struck Victor's chest, they skidded off as if hitting polished steel. Victor's skin was silver-plated from the inside out. He was a biomascanate horror, a wolf who had traded his soul for the power of the enemy's metal. Silas let out a roar of pain as Victor buried a silver-coated claw into his side. Narrators note the sound of tearing flesh and the sizzling of silver poison. The music turned somber, desperate. "HES going to die," Cassius whispered from beside her. The disgraced Beta had crawled back to the walls to fight, his eyes full of a strange, newfound respect for the woman who had stood the altar. "No wolf can pierce that armor." "I can," Evelyn said, her voice a cold, sharp blade. She turned to Cassius. "I need your fastest rider, and I need the alpha spear, the one forged from the meteorite. I'm going down there." "It's suicide," Cassius warned. "No," Evelyn replied, looking at the blood still weeping from her arm. "It's a transfusion." The battlefield was a blur of teeth and steel. Evelyn ran through the mud, the signet ring on her finger glowing with a frantic light. Narrators note the sound of heavy breathing, the clashing of swords, the squelch of mud underfoot. The world narrows down to a single objective. Victor stood over the fallen Silas, his silver hand raised for the killing blow. "Any last words, King of Nothing?" "Silas, catch," Evelyn screamed. She didn't throw a weapon. She threw herself. She collided with Silas just as the blow fell, the silver claw glancing off her steel breastplate. In that split second, she grabbed the dull, gray meteorite spear lying in the dirt and smeared her shimmering, mercurial blood across its length. The spear didn't just glow, it shrieked. A violent violet flame erupted from the metal, the ancient meteorite recognizing the origin element in Evelyn's blood. Silas's hand closed around the shaft, and for a moment, the bond between them reached its absolute peak. Silas felt her strength, her memories of the royal vault, her terror, and her unwavering love. He didn't just see Victor, he saw the flaws in Victor's silver armor. With a roar that shattered the remaining glass in the fortress windows, Silas thrust the spear forward. It didn't meet resistance. It melted through Victor's chest like a hot wire through wax. Victor's eyes widened. The silver in his body began to react violently to the origin blood, turning from a shield into a cage of molten agony. With a final, agonizing howl, the Iron Claw Alpha shattered into 1,000 shards of gray ash. Silence fell over the Black Peaks. The invading pack, seeing their god-king disintegrated, broke and fled into the shadows of the forest. The adrenaline of the battle faded, replaced by a cold, numbing void. Evelyn collapsed into Silas's arms, her skin as pale as the moon she had fought so hard to honor. Narrators note the music as haunting, a single cello playing a slow, mournful melody. The sound of Silas's ragged, sobbing breaths. "Evelyn, stay with me," he pleaded, his human hands trembling as he tried to staunch the shimmer of silver blood. "The map. It's taking too much from you. The metal is crystallizing in your heart. I did it." "Silas," she whispered, her eyes fluttering. "I saved my home." "You are my home," he roared at the empty sky. He carried her to the altar of the first wolf once more. The elders gathered, their faces grim. "The silver is consuming her, Alpha," Elder Thorn said quietly. "She is human. She cannot process the origin element, unless you turn her. But the ritual for a human carrying the vein, it has never been done. She might become a monster, or she might just burn." "I don't care," Silas said, his eyes glowing with a violet fire that brooked no argument. "She gave her blood for us. I will give my soul for her." He lowered his head, his canines extending. He didn't bite for hunger, he bit for life. He sank his teeth into her neck, and at the same moment, he sliced his own palm, pressing it against her wound. Narrators note a sudden, sharp intake of breath. The music swells into a powerful, orchestral crescendo. The bond didn't just snap into place, it exploded. Silas felt his own wolf spirit rush into the void of Evelyn's dying body. He fought the silver, his own immortality battling the metal curse. For hours, they lay on the obsidian, two bodies locked in a war of biology and magic. Then, just as the first rays of dawn touched the peaks, Evelyn's heart gave a single, thunderous thump. Her eyes snapped open. They weren't brown anymore. They were a brilliant, shimmering violet, flecked with shards of molten gold. The Black Peaks had never been more peaceful. The scars of the siege were hidden under a fresh blanket of spring wildflowers, though the obsidian altar still shimmered with a faint violet light on full moon nights. Narrators note the sound of a gentle wind, the distant howling of a happy pack, a sense of finality and peace. Evelyn stood on the balcony, her hair caught in the breeze. She looked down at her hands. They were steady, strong, and when she willed it, her nails sharpened into translucent, silver-hard claws. A pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist. Silas buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent, no longer just lavender and fear, but ozone, wild roses, and the deep, rich musk of a queen. Thinking about the map, he asked, his voice a low, contented purr. Thinking about how it's finally gone, she said, leaning back into his heat. The vein is sealed. The silver's part of me now, not a curse, but a shield. You lied to me that first night, Silas reminded her, a teasing glint in his amber eyes. I did, she laughed, turning in his arms to face him. I told you I was your mate to save my life. And I lied too, Silas whispered, his lips brushing hers. I told myself I was only keeping you for the pack, when the truth was I would have burned the world down just to see you smile once. So, we're both liars, she murmured, her violet eyes glowing with a love that transcended species and time. No, Silas replied, pulling her into a deep, definitive kiss. We're just as souls who found the truth in a very dangerous story. Narrator's note fade out with a powerful howl that echoes across the mountains, joined by a second, equally strong voice. The story of the Liar Queen and the Wolf King would be told for 1,000 years. This story proves that a true queen and a true mate isn't defined by the fears of the past or the chains of biology. She is defined by the purity of her fire and the magnitude of what she is willing to sacrifice to protect a soul that was once lost in shadow. Cassius and Dalena held the ancient prejudices of the pack, but Evelyn possessed the shimmering violet light that burned away their lies. If you enjoyed this emotional roller coaster of ancient magic, forbidden heat, and a love that redefined a kingdom, please give this video a massive thumbs up. Your support truly helps this channel grow and lets me know that you crave more powerful, high-stakes romances like the legend of the Silver-Eyed Luna. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I have another heart-connecting werewolf romance coming next week involving a broken, rejected Omega and a ruthless secret billionaire Alpha who will do anything to reclaim the mate he once turned away. You absolutely do not want to miss it. It's going to be a wild ride from the very first minute. What was your favorite moment in today's epic tale? Was it the breathtaking soul bond that shattered the altar of the first wolf, or the legendary moment Evelyn smeared her own mercurial blood on the meteorite spear to save her king? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and I love hearing your theories on the Orange and Silver bloodline. Until next time, stay fierce, stay wild, and I'll see you in the next chapter.